again. I'm calling Fletcher long. They searched the car again. They couldn't find nothing wrong. I caught a charge again. I'm calling Fletcher long. They searched the car again. They searched the car again.
To my lawyer, get him on the phone. The bow tie killer, aka
Couldn't find nothing wrong. I caught a charge again. I'm calling Fletcher long. They searched the car again. They searched the car again. Couldn't find nothing wrong. I caught a charge again. I'm calling Fletcher long. They searched the car again. They couldn't find nothing wrong.
Let me talk to my lawyer, get him on the phone. The bow tie killer, aka Fletcher Long. When it comes
I caught a charge again. I'm calling Fletcher long.
All right, everybody, welcome to G1NBC Live. This is John Spalding, and this is the pilot episode of the long version featuring Fletcher Long. And today's guest is Frank R. Wilson, so we're going to go ahead and turn it over to them and get the broadcast started for today. So thanks you all for being here. Make sure that you chat live, and either Charles or myself, who are on the call, will bring your comments in and ask any questions that you guys have, and have a good interaction with our host and guests. So, hey, Fletcher, how are you today?
I'm doing well, John. Thank you. I'm pleased as punch to be here with G1NBC, your Oakley-owned hometown television of the future. It's exactly what we've got here. I've got Frank Wilson on with me right now. He's a licensed motivational speaker and what's that called, Frank? A life coach? Or are you a life coach?
Well, I mean, you might say that. I don't know if I'm licensed, but it's something certainly that I've been doing.
You are a SAG-AFTRA eligible actor with the Cindy Hill Agency, and you live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I really want to get right into it, Frank, because you've just gotten off of a very interesting project called Liberty Waning. And it's particularly topical because of what's been going on in the country with the shootings at different mass shootings in Parkland, Florida, for instance. One of the more recent ones, of course, the Charleston church shooting. And we've covered a lot of these in my old radio days when you used to be a host with me. We used to be on together on the same station out of Long Island, New York. And you were involved in a project called Liberty Waning. And I want you to tell us about it because it's really interesting. Tell us about your role in that particular film.
This was a short film that was done actually by a retired history teacher that has a profound interest in constitutional issues. And he wrote this film where there was the arc of the story is there's a shooting that takes place. And instead of arresting and prosecuting the person who pulled the trigger, they arrest and prosecute the gun. And so the arc of the story is the trial that takes place, and I'm the prosecuting attorney. You might say I'm the bad guy because this film actually has a definite point of view. It's political satire.
Right.
But the gun trial, and you'd have to watch to see whether or not we're able to convict the gun or not.
So in this film, I guess the good guy's the gun, right? If you're the antagonist, the protagonist would be the firearm.
Yeah, that's the good guy, and whether or not the good guy wins or not, we have to wait and see.
Let me ask you this question, Frank. What do you say to those people? And of course, that you were an actor hired to play a role. That doesn't mean it's necessarily your political ideology. I mean, you were an actor, you were hired to play a role. But what do you suppose the argument is to the position that when the Second Amendment was passed, we were firing black powdered muskets capable of shooting a round every 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes if you were particularly adept at loading the musket and batting down the powder and igniting it and shooting it, and you had a lot of misfires and stuff. Today, you have multi-round magazines that are capable of shooting 50 to 100 people in a matter of seconds, depending on the weapon. is the Second Amendment, has it been technically outdated by our ability to shoot a lot of rounds in a short period of time is my question. What do you say to that?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. In fact, if anything, it's as timely and as important today as it was back then. My understanding, and I've, maybe I'm not at the level that you are, but I've certainly done some reading and some research on it. It's about being able to have the right to protect yourself and your property. And quite frankly, it was also about protecting yourself from tyranny from the government. That's what it was about then. That's what it's about now. It's a God-given right that I should be able to protect myself, my family, and my property. And I don't see how that's changed because maybe the weapon has changed. It's just interesting how the discussion is always, whenever one of these events happens, that it all focuses on the gun and not on the person who pulled the trigger. There's been a bunch of stabbings in London lately. Do we talk about banning knives, or do we talk about the evil people that pulled out these acts? That's why I thought the movie was very timely, and it happened right after the Orlando shooting when we were going to do this. And the odd thing is, there was an actor that was to play my part who pulled out because he didn't feel comfortable about it.
Yeah.
And I was brought in at the last minute, and I was delighted because I felt that it was an important message that, the guns aren't the problem. And this film helps to illustrate that it's not an inanimate object that's the problem, the person who pulls the trigger.
Well, let me ask you this question. Obviously, there's been stabbings, but you're not going to be able to kill 17. Let me say this. If you kill 17 people in a stabbing incident before somebody wrestles the knife away from you, that's probably about 14 people that deserve to die. And I'm borrowing that from a comedian, but you know what I'm saying.
I know, yeah.
The Second Amendment, obviously, and I will speak to this a little bit. I do have a doctorate in jurisprudence, but the Second Amendment does protect us from the government. That was its intent. Its intent was for us to be able to rise up and overthrow the government anytime that we felt it necessary, anytime that we felt the government was no longer governing by the people, of the people, and for the people. And there are people right now that feel that it might be time. You've got all of the corruption that is being bannered about in the higher echelons of law enforcement, for instance. A lot of people feel that the Federal Bureau of Investigation is rampant with corruption and people that are abusing legal processes in order to try to make a person they did not want to get elected not able to serve out his term, and using it for, a lot of people have that feeling. And again, anything I say about guns or the Second Amendment shouldn't be interpreted as my personal opinion. I'm playing the devil's advocate. That's what a talk show is. We go back and forth. But what do you say about the fact that people are getting access to guns, as it turns out, that shouldn't be getting the gun in the first place? They either have mental health issues. I think there was a shooter here in Tennessee at the Waffle House who had been convicted of an offense that would have precluded him from having a gun. And I think that his dad actually got the gun and gave it to him, which may end up netting him consequences and criminal culpability. The problem, is it a fair statement in your mind to say that the problem is not the object, but maybe the problem is that there are laws on the books today that are not being followed?
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
not being enforced. The people that shouldn't be getting guns are getting guns. Is that an issue, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are laws on the books right now that are intended to prevent those kinds of individuals from getting them. They're just loosely enforced, or things fall through the cracks in the system, and that's what needs to be focused on. Certainly, my support of the Second Amendment has nothing to do with letting a crazed individual be able to get their hands on a weapon like that. No reasonable person would support that. But this is kind of like the tyranny of the minority, that just because there are a few people that are like that, it ends up affecting the 98, 99% of the people that are responsible gun owners. So yeah, those laws need to be tightened up. They need to be enforced better. We certainly have the technology to be able to form databases to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen. But nothing will ever be 100% foolproof. And so I think we need to recognize that as well.
Well, I want to ask you this question. We've got a clip from Liberty Waning, and I think John's going to be able to play it. But one thing I want to ask you before we get to the clip, I have heard it said that we're at war now, that America is involved in a war now. It's just a type of war that we've never before fought. And, you know, you have these domestic terrorist cells. You have attacks against the institutions of government. You had a shooting just, I think, yesterday at one of the largest malls in Nashville, Tennessee, which is close to me, which is why I would know about it. What are your thoughts about that? Are we presently at war? You know, not since we fought the pirates of the Barbary Coast have we ever been at war with something that was not a country. Are we at war with something now that is not a country? Is this a enemy? Are we fighting an enemy presently that is hard to even find, hard to even define, hard to even identify? Is my question.
Well, yeah, there's a couple of them out there. One being ISIS and people overseas. That's certainly one battle that's going on. That's very hard to identify the enemy. But yeah, I don't know if we're at war internally yet. We're certainly getting close, and that's what's so scary about it. It has gotten to the point where we can't have reasonable conversations. It's gotten to the point where we can't disagree without being disagreeable, and that's scary. That we had a conversation yesterday in a training class that I was facilitating, that it's getting to the point where you can't have a disagreement without a disagreement without people coming to fisticuffs or something, or having to walk out of the room. I don't know what's happened to us, but that needs to change, or it will become a war that we've never seen before. I don't think we're there yet, but we're certainly on the edge of it.
You know, as this is a pilot, I want to, a note for next time, Spalding, remind me to turn my ringer off as I as I get a phone call in the middle of this show. Chris Veed has joined us, and he says, let's ban vans and trucks. We know there are crazy drivers as well. I've heard that.
An important note, Chris is the director and writer of Liberty Waning, so I'm glad he's joined in.
Well, he's joined in. John, do you have a clip ready for us? I think Frank sent us a clip or a trailer or something. Can we go to that? I'd like to see that.
Yeah, that sounds good. So we're going to check out the Liberty Waning trailer right now. Chris, thanks for being here. And Fletcher, good job on taking notes for next time. And I'll let you guys know when the trailer's over. We'll be right back.
So you still think this is all some sort of left-wing conspiracy to take your guns away?
So you're confessing to the crime.
I did it.
Look like that guy over there.
Show me your hands. Get out of the truck.
We already have the guilty party in custody. Get this nutball out of here.
Objection. The defense is questioning the humanity of the witness.
The only people that need guns are the police.
Will you let emotion guide you? Or will you let the facts of the case lead you to a just decision?
What do you have to say to politicians who say these numbers are greater?
Well, I say they are distorting the facts, trying to advance their political agenda, but facts are facts.
There are no room for facts in this courtroom.
No, I think this is a concerted government effort to limit our Second Amendment right to bear arms.
All right, guys, we're back. That was the
That's
trailer.
That's some powerful stuff. Way to go, Frank.
Thank you. I'm so proud to be associated with it. I will, and I hope people check it out. It's available on Vimeo. I think there's a small rental fee of like $1.99, and it's a 25-minute film. It's not a large investment in time, but it shows you the power of independent filmmaking. There's a lot of very creative, sharp people that are out there that are making these sorts of films that deserve to be seen. And I hope people go and check it out. It's like I say, it's on Vimeo. Small little charge to watch it, and I think it'll provoke discussion and make you think a little bit as well.
Let me ask you this question, Frank, because you can obviously look at the two of us and tell we have a little age on us. have we become yeah, you're welcome. Have we become a society that is incapable of civility? It seems to me like that every night I watch news reports from angry people or people that are portraying themselves as angry people. And now there are some people that have every right to be angry at some of the news that is out there. I'm not saying that they don't, but it seems to me like that we've kind of lost an ability to effectively have a debate about matters on which we may disagree without giving respect to the person whose opinion still has merit, whether or not you agree.
Yeah, it appears that way. I think social media is partly to blame for that. It's very easy to remain anonymous and express an opinion and say, you're full of it, or I'm banning you from Facebook. I mean, it's very easy to say these kind of hurtful comments on Facebook, and that's where a lot of the disagreement comes from, and where you see these people acting with pure hate. And yeah, debate has become a lost art, and it's scary. The answer to speech you don't like is more speech. I've always said that. But there are a lot of people that want to suppress speech right now, and that's a dangerous path to go down. There's no reason why we can't all express our opinions without having to fly off the handle and walk out of the room or insult someone's personal integrity. And it's concerning that we're kind of reaching that point right now.
I want you to take us through you're transitioning in your professional life just as I. Different reason, but you're transitioning nevertheless. And you have gone, I think you owned and operated a bed and breakfast for years, didn't you? And now you've gone into acting. You've always wanted to be an actor. You seem to have always had that bent. Tell us about your acting and what made you go into that particular discipline.
Well, I guess there were a couple of things. In addition to the bed and breakfast, I also was a corporate HR guy for 25 plus years. And there's a couple of things I've said about this transition. One, that corporate life I didn't leave corporate life left me. And the other thing that happened, and my wife always jokes about this, that I had a midlife crisis, basically. I had a midlife crisis that a blonde in a sports car wasn't going to fix. What am I going to do with my life? And so you're right, it is something I've always kind of been interested in, wanting to do, given the fact that in my career, I was always up in front of people conducting seminars and performing, basically. When I was teaching to groups of 500 to 500 people, it seemed like a very natural transition to make. And so what had happened was that living here now in Baton Rouge, which ends up being what's referred to as Hollywood South, there are actually a lot of movies and TV shows that are being done down in this part of the country. And just on a whim, I put in to be a background actor on a movie called Magnificent Seven, which was filmed here a few years ago. Lo and behold, late on a Friday night, I got a call saying, "Can you show up at 5:30 tomorrow morning?" And 6 weeks later, I was wrapping up. I mean, I was on that film for 6 weeks, and you can only see me for about 10 seconds, if that, in the movie. But that's what really caught my attention. With all due respect to the fine, respected actors that were on that film, I started to look at them and I said, I can do this. And so that led to kind of, acting classes, being really serious about it, trying to learn about the craft, networking with a bunch of people, securing an agent, and getting my face out there. And, while I'm not a face that you would necessarily recognize, I've had some minor success. I've been in some commercials, national and local. I was in an episode of Queen Sugar, which is an episodic on Oprah Winfrey Network. And some things in the pipeline that I hope will come to fruition. So the transition has been challenging, but it's one of the most fun things I think I've ever done. The only thing I would tell other people, if you decide to do something like this, particularly midstream in your life and career, is you got to have an understanding and supportive family. And I'm beyond grateful have that for me, because it's been difficult on my family. to go through this transition, and to have their support and understanding is priceless. I mean, I will never be able to repay them for the opportunity to try and give this a shot.
Well, as someone, you know, I practiced law for many years, and I'm assuming that people that are watching this show know my backstory. They may not, but I was convicted of a felony and lost my law license, and I went into radio initially. I was on terrestrial radio, and then I was on some digital stations in Long Island,
Right.
and now I'm with G1NBC, and I'm a columnist with their national news entity, and I also run G1NBC Christian County, and I write for the Kentucky Prep Gridiron, one of their principal writers and evaluators of high school football talent. So I've had to reinvent myself too. And the thing I would, and that's probably why you and I are such good friends, Frank, is because we've been through such similar experiences. But probably one of the things that I would caution anybody in reinventing yourself is you do have to have your family support. You can't do it without it. They have to be they have to be on board. Of course, for my family, they were kind of forced into it. You know, was one of those things I could get up again and try to walk, or I could die. You know, that's really the choices that I had. But you do have to have your family support. I mean, you have to have realistic expectations. Like, it would be unrealistic, Frank, for you to, you know, you were 25 years in HR, you owned a bed and breakfast, you were a corporate executive, and then you wake up one day and say, okay, well, I'm going to win an Oscar now. I mean, it for most people, and I think it hurts when there are stories where that actually happens, because people get this surrealistic expectation that that's how things happen.
Yeah.
You remember when I started Kentucky Prep Gridiron? It's doing okay now. It's doing okay. It's gaining in popularity. It's gaining in importance and you know. But it didn't happen overnight. I didn't just, you know, start Kentucky Prep Gridiron and like the next day a ton of people just said, well, I'm going to subscribe. You know, you have to have a product. They have to be able to look at your product. They have to decide whether the product is worth their in being involved with the product, and whether it's a sufficient enough service. And it's like with acting, you know, you have to have a product. You are the product.
That's right.
And people have to make a determination as to whether or not that is a product that they want with which to be involved. You had to get an agent. Somebody had to say, hey, this is a guy that I can represent, that I think is marketable, and that I can get work, because their agent, I'm assuming, isn't going to make any money if this agent doesn't book you any work.
That's exactly right.
Is that right? So it doesn't happen overnight. It's the thing I would caution. You know, it doesn't happen overnight. So
right. I think the reasonable expectations comment is a good one as well. Yeah. I mean, I guess my goal, and I've never been big on setting really lofty goals, but I just want to make a living at it. I want to be one, maybe, you know, best case scenario would be I'd be one of those people that you might say, I've seen him somewhere before, but I don't know where. And if I kind of reach that level where maybe I'm, you know, casually recognized, that means I've been out there and working in small roles in a variety of different TV shows and films. And if I can reach that level, you know, that I think that'd be pretty lofty in itself. The red carpet and the Oscar stuff, I mean, if that happens, that'd be great, but I don't have any expectation of that happening at all.
Well, and you know, Frank, that I've interviewed before, particularly on radio, actors at different and various degrees of their professional lives.
Right.
You remember, and I think I can book a lot of these same guests again that will come on this forum.
I think so.
But I interviewed the guy that wrote Jaws, Carl Gottlieb, who also wrote the movie The Jerk with Steve Martin. And you know, I've interviewed I interviewed the guy that played in Ocean's 11, who played the guy that beat up George Clooney in the back room. It was, you know, the make-believe fight. He was a former professional wrestler. His name is escaping me. Can you think of that guy's name? I know, I remember him being Jewish, and the only reason I remember his being Jewish is because he was so flagrantly proud of that fact. I mean, I think it, huh?
I think.
Who'd you say?
Scott Schwartz.
That's it. Scott Schwartz. That's it. He's like 6'8". Yeah, he's Jewish and very large. And I remembered Scott telling me, and I'm not going to go through every actor that I've interviewed because you know that that's a voluminous list of people. I've interviewed. You interviewed John Schneider on your radio show.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a big. You know, I've interviewed a lot of actors. A lot of them. I remember the guy that played Tom Hartman in Mary Hartman is a big actor because Mary Hartman is a very important show in the catalog of television. You know,
Right.
It's important. It was a groundbreaking show. It was the precursor to soap and all that kind of stuff. So all of that aside, enough with the patting myself on the back at my ability to land an interview in radio, because I did have an ability to book an interview in radio, but I'll never forget Scott Schwartz telling me that a very famous actor on that movie was a conservative politically and concealed it. And this is a guy that's a huge Oscar nominated to Oscar winning caliber actor. Obviously, everybody knows that Mel Gibson's conservative and he's taken quite a beating for it in the industry. Not asking you for your political leanings, but asking you, is there an anti-conservative bias in Hollywood? Is it as bad as what is reported to us?
I've only seen it from afar, but yes, I've seen it. I remember I was on the set of LBJ for a day. I actually got seen quite a bit in that movie at the scene where he gets LBJ gets sworn in as president after the assassination. And I was in a scene that takes place on Air Force One. And we finished that day and we were having lunch. And I can remember hearing Rob Reiner way off in the distance. You know, he wasn't yelling in anger. He's just a very loud person. Just yelling out about, you know, how evil Trump was going to be if he won. This was before the election took place, and just going on and on with an obvious slant towards liberalism. I've heard enough stories to know that, yeah, it is out there. And I've even told you that I don't even consider myself, quote, conservative in a classic sense. I consider myself a conservatarian, which to me is kind of like
You're a libertarian with conservative leanings? Is that a fair?
Oh, it's kind of like a fiscally conservative, small government, but socially liberal. And that's a very simplistic way to put it. It's not quite that easy, but that's just one way to look at it. And I think actually there's probably a lot of people in Hollywood and in the industry that if they knew that word existed or that philosophy existed, I suspect they'd probably identify themselves as that, but they don't. So the answer to your question is, yeah, it's out there. And yes, it's always been emphasized to me to maybe, you know, suppress that and keep that down. And I do. I've got, again, because what we talked about earlier, how it seems like we can't have civil discourse anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm avoiding it now, which is sad. I like to talk about those kind of things, but if people can't respond with, you know, personal attacks because they don't agree with me, I just don't even want to fool with it anymore. So
Frank, I want to play your demo reel. You were nice enough to provide us with a demo reel of some of your work, and I'm going to ask John if he'd go on and play that because I think your work is quite remarkable.
Okay, well, it still needs some work. I still need to clean it up, but at least it's representative of some of the things that I've done. You know.
Cool. Let's check that out. And this is Frank R. Wilson's demo reel, and check that out, and we'll be right back.
Thank you, Your Honor. If it please the court, I would like to present a video from the body cam of the police officer to back up his testimony. So not only was he fleeing, but he was also resisting arrest.
When he has no arms.
Objection, Your Honor. The defense is trying to confuse the witness.
Your Honor!
Are there any further questions?
Nobody was safe.
Company doesn't want to give up profits. People be damned, you know? I'm just
hoping for some permanent form of benefits from this company.
Mr. Royal, this is Hollywood Destiny, the man who got us back on track these last 3 weeks.
Hey, I can't take all the credit. The whole team makes it happen.
Well, thanks for the whole team.
We're gonna miss our tea time here, John.
You boys keep up the good work.
Right this way, gentlemen.
Sorry about that. I needed to work out some last details of my trip.
Hey, Gabi was telling us you're going to Germany.
Yes, I mean, quite frankly, the sabbatical to Germany wouldn't have been possible without Gabby's help. She helped me push through a lot of long nights in the lab. I'd like to take Gabby with me on my sabbatical to Germany.
Will they be going as well?
No, just Gabby.
We are a video production company that produces dynamic and engaging videos for attorneys to help you win the case. We create mini documentaries for clients showing a day in the life, legal settlements, legal videography, settlement in the day of the life videos, and anything in between. With 20 years of experience, we hit the mark every time. None of us seem to be able to shoot quite like you. See that black dot right there? There's 10 rounds, all within a quarter of an inch from each other. At 50 yards, Corporal. I'd like to see what you could do at ranges of 250 and higher.
I did, sir. Maybe try another page?
Where exactly did you learn to group like that, son?
When I was a kid.
Must be some BB gun.
Yep.
Steady.
Got a good head on his shoulders.
Don't know about that hair, though.
You do remember I'm still sitting here.
Just saying.
All right, so that's the highlight reel. Was that Trey Gowdy in there in that one scene?
Yes, it was. It ended up doing a commercial for him in the last election cycle, and he is exactly like he is on television. He was very, the quintessential Southern gentleman, I would say. And we got along famously. He was very nice, posed for a couple of pictures for us, and we got a chance to talk and learn a little bit of inside Washington kind of stuff. So it was yeah, it was great. And I'm not surprised he's not running for re-election. Based on what I heard from him when we were shooting that commercial, I think he was kind of getting tired of the bull crap, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It really feels like, Frank, that the people are getting off the ship, doesn't it? You've got Paul Ryan that's not running for re-election. Trey Gowdy's not running for re-election. Of course, John McCain's not long for the world, bless his heart, and our prayers are with him. But it certainly does seem as though a lot of people are, maybe politics has become so ugly, Frank, that people just don't want to be involved with it anymore.
It's exactly, and we're losing good people on both sides. And that's not only is it sad, it's tragic. It has gotten so dirty, and it's people who go in and want to serve the country and feel very passionate about it, and a lot of them do, find out how things really work, and they can't stomach it after a while. The swamp does exist, and I don't know how anybody on this broadcast feels about Trump, but while I wasn't a big supporter of him in the beginning, I do like the idea of draining the swamp, but I don't think it's gonna. It's real and it exists, and unfortunately, it is starting to gobble up really good people and spitting them out, and that's tragic for the republic.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to the long version here and watching the long version here on G1NBC, your locally owned hometown G1NBC, and I have with me Frank Wilson. Frank is an accomplished actor who has formerly been a corporate executive in human resources, and also has owned and operated a bed and breakfast. And we're really pleased to have Frank with us today. And you're watching the pilot episode of the long version. And I want to comment on the theme music, if I may, because there may not be another opportune time to do it. But both songs that bring us on, the song that brings us on air, the song that takes us off, were both original compositions that were written for the long version radio show that was donated by a guy named Randy Fincham. I think I should give him a little bit of a plug. Randy is a famous songwriter in Nashville who wrote the song "I Can't Wait to Waste a Little Time." Sammy Kershaw had a big hit with. He's written several tracks that were on Mary Duff's latest album, about 4 tracks. He's 4 cuts on that album. And we also the other song was a rap song that was written about me when I was a lawyer. My nickname in the courtroom was the Bowtie Killer. I did not kill anyone, but that is what I felt like I better throw that in. But anyway, that was my nickname, and that song was called the Bowtie Killer. And I'll never forget when he did it just on his own. He just contacted me one day and said, "Hey, I've written this song about you." And I didn't know what he wanted me to do with it, Frank. I couldn't tell if he wanted me to buy it and use it as an ad. And, I said, "Look, I really don't advertise, so I don't really need a theme song or anything." He said, "Oh, no, I just have watched you on television trying cases, and it just struck me. And so I wrote the song. I thought you might want it." And he sent it to me. And when I played it, my son, William Long, who's a teenager, he wasn't a teenager then. I mean, he might have been 12. It's years ago. But he looked at me and he said, "Dad, that's really cool." And, there's nothing like looking cool in the eyes of your son. So I really appreciated that. But that song was written and composed by a guy named Robbie Porter. And he was a rapper in the Clarksville, Tennessee area of some repute. And it's called the Bowtie Killer. So the theme music is original. So we don't have to worry about paying anybody for either one of the songs. We own the rights. Well, I guess Randy Fincham probably owns the rights to the long version, but he's been gracious enough to let me. He's fine with me playing it, and he wrote it for the show. He's a big fan of the show. When Randy figures out we're back on, Randy will be back. He will be back. You were on my radio show, which was a 2-hour show, many times. There was a time when I really thought about adding you as a co-host because our back and forth I found to be pleasant, and I thought that your opinions were well informed. And one thing I want to talk about, because you are in entertainment, and I think that there's some things about this case, the Me Too movement and Bill Cosby and Cosby's being convicted. Do you think Cosby got a fair trial? I mean, I'm not asking you if he did or didn't do it, because I think those are two completely separate questions. Do you think with the media coverage of Me Too complaints, do you think with the judge allowing character evidence in, allowing 5 women that never charged him, never even sued him, to tell the jury that he had done the same thing to them, resulting in the juries concluding that if he had done it to these other 5, then he must have done it to this one here, which is exactly why character evidence is not supposed to be admitted. Do you think that Bill, from what I know you didn't follow it like I did, but do you think that he got a fair trial?
Yeah, I didn't, in all fairness, I didn't follow it real closely, but I have my concerns as well from, that you've just addressed about some of the things that were done in the second trial, after the original one was a mistrial. Given the atmosphere and everything that's been going on, that was basically kind of started with the Harvey Weinstein episode. There was almost no chance that he was going to have any kind of a fair trial anyway. Yeah, I would guess that from a technical standpoint, if you're looking at the fairness of the process and was it fair, I would kind of tend to say it probably wasn't. Did he do it? Oh, yeah, I have no doubt that he did it. And I'm so sad and disappointed in someone that I really looked up to, that indeed this is the case. But should he have been convicted? With the But the way that the process went, I'm not so sure. I don't think he had a chance.
Well, you know, something you and I talk about, Frank, when we talk privately, and we're friends in the interest of full disclosure. I don't want to pull a Hannity, you know, and not say, but you and I are friends, and I'm kidding, Sean. But you know, something that we discuss all the time is we don't have criminal jurisprudence in America where the end justifies the mean. You don't get to the end of a conviction of Bill Cosby and say, okay, should it matter what processes were used? Because after all, he did it. Well, the answer to that, if you believe in our Constitution, I don't know whether you do or don't. I know you do. I'm talking about the viewer. If you believe in our Constitution, yes, it matters. No, it's not okay to get the right answer, but work the problem the wrong way. That is what the guarantee of due process is, that the government not only has to work the problem correctly and arrive at the correct answer, but they have to work the problem the correct way. They have to do it the right way. And the only cost to the government that can ever be made for them to burden for doing it the wrong way is they get to lose. I mean, they lose their guy. I mean, that's the way that's supposed to work. So it's not an end justifies the means. So a lot of people say, okay, well, Bill Cosby did it. So what does it matter whether or not he got a fair trial? Well, it matters if you believe in democracy and freedom and a constitutional representative republic, which is what we really are instead of a democracy. It matters for those reasons. And I'm alarmed because I'm going to give you some information that some people don't have. Okay. Hang on a second. Somebody, I'm going to give you some information that some people don't have. Character evidence is not admissible because juries aren't supposed to say, this is a bad guy. And I don't know if he acted poorly or badly at this moment, but since he's a bad guy, I'm going to go ahead and convict him, even though he might not have done this, because after all, he's a bad guy.
Yeah.
You know, and if the jury arrives at that conclusion, if you get to put, you know, Bill Cosby on trial and say, look, man, this guy is a sexual predator. He preyed on this woman who never complained, sued, or had him charged. He preyed on this second woman who never sued him or had him charged. He pled on woman 3, woman 4, woman 5. Don't you think it's logical the jury at the end of the trial is going to say, well, if he did it these other 5 times, even if I'm not sure he did it this time, shouldn't I err on the side of caution? Shouldn't I just go ahead and convict him? Because even if he didn't do it this time, he should be punished for these other times. And if the jury arrives at a conviction because of that, that is wrong. That's not okay. And that's what I'm afraid may have happened in his trial. I'm not here to tell you Bill Cosby is a good guy. I want him to be a good guy because I've been a fan of his for a long time. I've heard rumors that a lot of the reasons that they had him charged was he was in a bid to buy the National Broadcasting Company. I don't know what you've heard the same thing. I see you shaking your head. Yes. So you've heard the same thing. I don't know what one has to do with the other, but I've heard that rumor. But it's not, you know, people say all the time that OJ was a failure in criminal justice. No, he was not. OJ was was the legal process being validated. OJ needed to win. He needed to walk because they cheated to get him. But ever since then, ever since the OJ verdict came down, it seems like every jury that's hit the box since has had the opinion, you're not going to OJ me. And it has given the criminal defense bar a very negative and very, it's made American culture very suspicious. You're not going to OJ me. Now, I've kind of laid a lot out there. You see why the show's called The Long Version, because I don't ever let my guests speak. But I want your comment on some of these.
Yeah, I agree with you on your assessment of the OJ thing. I always kind of felt like that he did it, but because of the process and the way it works, I don't think it was beyond a reasonable doubt. So I actually didn't disagree with the verdict, believe it or not.
You and I were the only two white people in America that, I mean, because the people's opinion of it almost went right down racial lines. But now I was glad that he won, but not because I don't think he killed them. I think that Ron Goldman's life and Nicole Brown Simpson's life is no different than any other life spent in defense of American constitutional representative republic. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're being a good lawyer. You're being objective and looking at the law and looking at the process. Just like Alan Dershowitz right now, who is about as left-leaning liberal as you can possibly get, has been defending Trump and how he's been treated here recently with all these accusations. Someone's got to stand up for the rule of law and the way the process works, even when you don't like the outcome, because it's a slippery slope. If let's just allow it this time, or he was guilty, we gotta let's just finagle the system so where we can get the result that we want. That's very dangerous to start doing that. It's going to become more and more like that, and then one time it'll be you that's affected that way, and you're gonna say, well, what about the process? So yeah, it's very dangerous, kind of where this is going right now. And I guess the judge is the one who bears the responsibility for this, and why they made the choices they did to allow that extra evidence versus the first trial. I don't know.
Well, I write, as you know, and you read a lot of what I write, but I guess you would call me a syndicated columnist. Okay. Yeah. And I write for G1NBC, both Christian County and its National Wire. And I wrote an editorial entitled Bill Cosby Convicted, basically, was it the right decision? I think it was entitled Comedian Bill Cosby Convicted Probably Fails to See the Humor Here. And I also wrote an article entitled McIver Guilty, and that was Tex McIver, the famous attorney down in Atlanta that got convicted, but was justice served. And I want to call everybody's attention. Both these stories appeared on the G1NBC International Newswire. And I want to call people's attention to this. Go read it, is what I'm telling you. I'm telling you to go read it because I make a better and more profound argument than I'm capable of making orally about, the apparatus that we call justice, and why some of these things are bad.
Yeah, and Fletcher's a terrific writer. So I can vouch for that.
But anyway, I was, and thank you very much. But one thing that I said in here about particularly the McIver trial, do you remember this? This was a pretty interesting case in the fact that the McIvers were very wealthy individuals. She was a corporate executive. He was a very famous trial attorney who actually had been on the American Bar Association Standing Committee on Gun Violence. Right. So, I mean, this is a guy, liberty waning. You see how this all comes back, but one thing that I was critical of in my editorial was the judge that presided. The jury had informed him that they couldn't reach an opinion, and he told them, well, you just have to go back there until you come back with a verdict. When they came back in with a guilty verdict, he chuckled as they handed him the verdict. Now, for the listeners, the way this works is they come in with a verdict. The judge says, do you have a verdict? And the jury foreman says, yes, Your Honor, we do. And he says, let me see it. He looks at the verdict first, hands it back to be announced, right? And he chuckled. And I don't know what he thought was funny about it, because Tex McIver is going to spend the rest of his life in jail. And I don't think this guy has committed a murder. And go read the article and research it, and you tell yourself. There's a lot of people who agree with me that Tex McIver did not commit a murder. that this was an accidental shooting, including his wife, who went to her maker saying to the doctor attending her as she died that it was an accident that she was shot.
Yeah. I know we're starting to run short on time. I hope you don't mind me just kind of bringing to mind a couple of things real quick.
Please do.
I have a real love affair with film music, and I'm going to restart a podcast that I used to do called What's the Score, where I'll play cues from various films, mostly from the 60s through the early 2000s. And I hope people kind of keep their eye out for that, because it's a labor of love that I do, and I love to share film music with people. And so that's one exciting thing that's in the pipeline. And the other thing is that if people are curious or interested in kind of what's going on with me or what I'm doing, I do have a website, and it's very simple. It's frankrwilson.com. There's information on there and photographs and links to videos and things like that. And I keep it updated pretty frequently. And I love to hear from people on Facebook. You can find me on there and on Instagram and all those other sorts of things. So, and just a lot of things in the pipeline that keep me busy.
Well, Frank, before we go off air, I want to tell everybody today's long version was brought to you by Zega. Zega is a line of health products, which John has up on the side if you're watching us. And because, it's what's on the inside that matters. Zega has a lot of health products like protein and recovery drinks for young athletes. My son takes Zega every morning and has accomplished phenomenal feats of strength, as you've seen on the if you follow me on Facebook. But Zega health products, it's what's on the inside. I want to thank G1NBC, your locally owned hometown G1NBC, and Joe Malik back at headquarters for allowing us to do this pilot. And I think it's been a big success. I think that we will continue to do these. I'd like to make this a weekly show. I'll start out with it being a weekly show with an hour, and I'll have different guests on. And if Frank Wilson will come back on, I would love to do it, because we're going to continue to mark your career, because I think you're doing something phenomenal. You're reinventing yourself. You've done some impressive work, and you've got the look. You're a good, as my mother would say, you're a good looking man. My mom's a big fan of yours.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, by the way. So,
well, I think we're out of town. I think we're out of time. John, do I need to send it back to you?
No, but that's okay.
Okay, well, I thought we had to go off there at 10:55.
Yeah, no, I mean we're done. You didn't have to send it back to me though. I was ready to hit the outro. So I appreciate it, and you guys did a great job today, Frank. It was awesome talking and hearing a little bit more about your story, Fletcher. Awesome pilot. I did get the ad up there as promised, and then they saw the G1NBC live promo and my production promo for my company, sgendeavors, and that's doing broadcasts like this in what I call creating 21st century social broadcasting.
Well, thank you, John Spalding. He's our producer. I want to thank Charles Rollo, who is the executive director of the long version. And thank you to our guest, Frank Wilson, and everybody at the G1NBC, your locally owned hometown G1NBC. Until next time, that's it from the long version.